start by presenting a little bit the format of this session before we directly go into the content that I would like to discuss with you. As for the format of the session, who are we and who am I? As you may know, the EIPM is a school specialized in purchasing. For the last 27 years. We are providing a lot of education products and especially certification products together with our executive MBA, which is held in Geneva for Europe and in Shanghai for Asia. As for myself, I am François. I am one of the EIPM teachers. And I specialized in two things. The first one is the strategy and the purchasing strategies and the strategies that we have towards suppliers. And the second specialization I have is soft skills, leadership, negotiation. That's all for me. As for the subject of today, you know it's about the attractiveness we have towards our suppliers. So be careful, it's about our attractiveness in the eyes of the supplier and not the contrary, on purpose, because we think it is a fundamental element of purchasing strategies to be an attractive customer and to be an attractive market outlet. And more than anything, it is something like a change in the purchasing mentality, a kind of revolution in how we buy, because we think about suppliers being attractive to us, but we don't think that much about us being attractive to suppliers. And as we will discuss in a minute, this has probably changed a lot in the markets because we become more and more dependent from the suppliers. The supply chains are more and more supply-centric instead of being customer-centric. And in this case, of course, our attractiveness can make the difference, especially when there's high value in the game, technology, innovation, exclusivity. Attractiveness is more and more important. As for the format of this session, this is around 1 hour plus a 30-minute question and answers. It's around 1 hour, but in reality, this is going to be 4 times 15 minutes, and at each end of each 15-minute block, so at each end of the 4 blocks, I will leave you just 1 minute to ask questions or to do anything that you would like, and then we will have, so this is from 9 to 10, and then from 10 to 10:30, this will be a proper discussion if you have things to discuss. This session is recorded, so to be accessible after. So of course, if you interact with us, this will be recorded too. You can leave a feedback after the session, and we're eager for you to give a feedback. There's a 30-minute question and answer questions. Right. I propose that we start with the context, with the content. And the first content is the whys of the attractiveness. Again, it's not necessarily how the procurement function has structured itself to be. We were born to supply factories and companies 60 years ago. And our focus in a lot of categories, in a lot of items that we buy, our focus is much more on procurement efficiency and especially the price. So what has changed so that now attractiveness has become a part of the game? There are situations in which we need more than a price focus or even a TCO, total cost of ownership focus. There are situations in which we need relationship. We need stability of relationship, we need exclusivity of relationship, we need attractiveness in the relationship, we need a strong relationship providing us with a big value, much more than price or TCO. Think about innovation, think about technology, think about all kinds of evolutive products. So what are the situations in which we need to think our attractiveness. The first type of situation is when the supply chains have become leaner and leaner. And if you think, well, this is what we have spent our time to achieve in the last 20 years. So in the last 20 years, we have reduced inventories, we have increased flexibility, we have implemented just in time, we have reduced lead times, we have asked the supplier to be more responsive, we have worked on the responsiveness and the agility of suppliers. To do that, we have invented such clever things like blockchains, etc., etc. In other terms, we have done a lot of work so that the supply chains are lean. They go quick, they go fast, there's no inventory, no time lost, and no cost being generated in the flow of products. Right. And of course, it means that it's a super system that works well, but generating a lot of risks, generating a lot of potential disruptions. Because if something happens, if there's a problem happening in a lean supply chain, of course, then we may get disrupted. We may have a supply disruption. We may get some exceptional cost to repair or solve the problem, etc., etc. So, in other terms, the lean supply chain are providing with short-term cost efficiency, but with a kind of vulnerability in the long run. And what can solve the situation then? Well, probably the fact of being more attractive. Then when we are confronted with these risks happening, disruption, stocks, costs, exceptional maintenance, when we are confronted with these risks, the first customers who will get their problems solved will be the customers who are kind of preferred by the suppliers. And we've seen this in a lot of cases in the last years when big companies have been hit by natural disaster, whether it is the Icelandic volcano, it's Fukushima, etc., etc. Some big companies have been impacted. Some of their clients, the clients of these big companies, have been impacted too. Some of their clients have been preserved because they have been privileged by the companies hit by the tsunami or the volcano or whatever. So lean supply chains generate risks, and risks are reduced only for attractive customers. That's one of the thing that happens. And the second thing is that we have integrated a lot of suppliers in the value chain. Think about what happens in the automotive. A lot of suppliers have the innovation, hold the innovation. Because they hold the innovation, we became more dependent, and we integrated them in the value chain, which means that we become dependent on them for their innovation, for their cost, for their products. So we concentrated on core business, we outsourced, we became more dependent of the supplier to which we outsourced. And of course, if we are not attractive, we are going to suffer from this dependency. And if we are attractive, this is going to be more a win-win situation with something equal between the two parties. And the last point that you can see here, I think is probably the most important one today. It's the need for growth. All companies need to grow, and to grow in terms of innovation, in terms of new product, to seize the opportunities of new technologies, whether it is digitalization, nanotechnologies, or whatever. The companies need to grow, they need to differentiate, and they very frequently differentiate through the suppliers. So the innovation comes more from the suppliers than from a lot of big companies. Conclusion, our growth depends on the suppliers. And the supplier will allow certain customers to get new technologies, new products, new developments before the others. So there will be clearly preferred customers who will get things before, and the rest of the customers. You'll see a little later that we will speak about the customers that our suppliers like to work with and have to work with. It's the one that they like to work with that get the innovation. So the need for growth needs to be attractive as a prerequisite. That is the economic background behind. The lean supply chains is something that is happening for the last 20 years. The strong integration of the suppliers in the value chain happens since the years 2000, and especially SRM and early integration of suppliers, vendor integration, etc., etc. The need for growth is definitely the focus for the last 5 years. So in the history of purchasing, we are living an economic background for the last 20 years, which has increased this need for attractiveness. I'd like to say more on that. And the fact that more and more in a number of business, big companies compete on the supply side as much as they compete on the selling side. I'll explain. We are also competing on the selling side. So let's say that we are company A, we are competing with company B, and we are competing to sell our products to customers. But when a supplier gets the exclusivity of an innovation, of a technology, of course, between A and B, there will be another type of competition, which is who between A and B is going to catch it first. And therefore, we are more in some markets, in a purchasing competition than in a selling competition. Why? Because if you purchase it before, or if you get it exclusively, then the sales will be automatic. So in reality, the route for competition, the key success factor, is much more on the buying side than on the selling side. Knowing that what has happened in the last 20 years is that a lot of our suppliers have merged, have bought one another, etc., etc. So in other terms, that you can see here, it's like two networks. These two networks are becoming superposed. That means we have a lot of suppliers which in reality are working for B and A, directly or indirectly. All these common suppliers that you can see here in the pink color, all these suppliers may be tempted to prefer B or A, and will prefer obviously the most attractive one. So there's a part of the supply chain which is a shared supply chain in common with our competitors, which is absolutely key to attract more and before our competitors attract them. And as you can see here, it's not only the first tier suppliers. Some technologies are coming from the second tier, from the third tier. You know that in certain industries like the electronic industry, PC or mobile phones, in the car industry, the innovative components are usually invented at tier 3 or tier 4. So all the art of buying, when you are a buyer at company A, is to detect who is at tier 3, the innovator we need, and how we have to become attractive toward tier 3 or tier 4 suppliers. And then all the rest will follow. So you see, this is a kind of revolution, because and it's not only a revolution in purchasing, it's a revolution around purchasing. When it's about differentiation, when it's about selling before selling more, positioning before our competitors, most of company executives think about sales or marketing, and not necessarily purchasing. And it's a mistake, because today the route for differentiation and for competitiveness is the attractiveness we have towards certain key strategic suppliers. So around purchasing, there should be an awareness that when it's about differentiating from our competitors, purchasing is probably one of the most important key success factors, and that purchasing is important because it's purchasing that can ensure the attractiveness towards customers. One of the questions, of course, deriving from what I've said, is who should I be attractive to? Probably not all suppliers, but probably not only direct suppliers, maybe second-tier suppliers or third-tier suppliers. Right. This is the philosophy, and this is what has happened in the market in the last 20 years, which explains how attractiveness has become maybe one of the key activities and the key deliveries of the purchasing function. And this can be enhanced and translated in the market by frequent reasons. First of all, we have markets in which we have less and less suppliers because they have merged, because they have become bigger and bigger, or sometimes because they have left some markets, right? So we sometimes have in some markets much less competition than we had 15 years ago. Even if we have competition, we may have limited resources at the suppliers to be allocated to a customer. And that is a direct consequence of what we buyers we have done in the last 15 years or 20 years. We have pushed the supplier to optimize their processes, to minimize their costs, which means that they would standardize everything, that they would probably take out resources which are not necessarily needed, all right? At the end of it, of course, they have less resources and they have optimized their resources, which means that they choose to who they will allocate these resources, to whom they will give time, to whom they will give technologies, to whom they will answer first in case of a problem. Suppliers have less resources, and the direct consequence is that they will choose more, select more the customers that they will allow these resources to. It's probably also in a lot of markets a question of reactivity. We need to be more reactive and sometimes proactive to any kind of change in the market. Think about what's happening in markets which are highly digitalized. And together with that, of course, a need for innovation and exclusivity. It's also an increasing competition between the supply chains between companies, and even sometimes supply chain between industries. Think about, for instance, what happens with self-driving cars. Who are going to be the main players of self-driving cars? Current car makers or companies like Google with the Google car? So you have here different supply chains competing on a new concept, which is in reality the convergence of two old concepts. So supply chains are more and more competing. Right. What can we expect then of being more attractive? We can probably expect better lead times, better response time, probably better quality, because quality is a question of investment of resources. Quality is due to how much people control quality, detect non-quality, solve non-quality issues. So again, through this preferential allocation of resources, we usually get more quality and response time and reactivity. It's also a question of allowance of capacity. When the capacities are short and they have to choose between customers, so we can get more assurance of supply. It's a question of proactivity and response time, so especially when the technologies are evolving fast and that we need to push for growth. Probably more proactiveness also in what we call service and after sales, how they solve problem, how they contact us, how they are available. More tricky, but more interesting, know-how and innovation. The more we are interfaced with the supplier, the more we benefit from their technologies, their know-how, their ideas, the more they open our eyes on what's happening on the markets. So it's a question, it's an access to innovation, pure product, pure licenses, pure technologies, but also not pure. That means know-how, not necessarily the product itself or the license itself, but be able to use it, be able to work with it without too many costs. So this is the know-how. We can expect more and more, and that's an interesting thing, risk sharing. So what is risk sharing? Risk sharing is when two companies decide that they would run a risk together. And for instance, they invest in a technology, but if the technology doesn't work and doesn't meet success, then the drawbacks of having invested on the wrong technology will not be or at the cost of only the supplier or only the customer. So we make it so that in reality we both suffer in a balanced manner. So these are long-term contracts in which we schedule investments, we also preview a return on investment, and we also prepare a potential non-return on investment so that it harms the two companies at the same level. Of course, sometimes it can go up to the market reputation, and the market reputation is when, by working with a supplier, that enhances our brand and our reputation. So we make it public that we work with a certain supplier to show that we are working with the best technologies. These are the reasons, these are the whys of the search of attractiveness as a key success factor of our purchasing strategies. I would like now to start a second part, which is, right, we've understood the whys of the attractiveness, but what is this attractiveness made of? Just before we start that, just 30 seconds, is there any, so we'll have half an hour for questions between 11 and 11:30 European time. But in case there is an urgent question or something you haven't understood, I give just a few seconds for you to interact. No urgent question, let's proceed. So what is attractiveness made of? In reality, we can see three types of value add as a customer when we are a customer. So this attractiveness requires a mental exercise that I would really like you to do for this hour together, which that we don't think in our own feet or own shoes anymore, we think in their shoes. So it's not about, it's less customer centric than supplier centric. So if you put yourself in the shoes of your supplier, what makes their client, and among their clients yourself, what makes their clients attractive or not? And you can see three routes of attractiveness. Either a customer is what we call a strategic customer. So that means that this is a customer which will support the company's future growth. So this is a customer that your supplier wants because they have the right technology, because they're present on the right market, because they have on the right geographic market, the right countries, because they're present on the right markets in terms of market targets, right? They're selling to the people that their product is devoted to. So basically, if you put yourself in the shoes of your supplier, there are customers which are unavoidable if you want to sell what you need to sell. This is frequently the case when you are in a B2B relationship with a customer, and the customer itself is in a B2C approach, right? So the customer sells to the final consumers. And then, of course, the customers can be strategic if they're present on the right markets toward the right people. So they have the right strategic resources, technologies, assets, implement a geographic footprint to support the supplier's future growth. And of course, for them, the strategic intent is to try to develop a relationship, a long-term relationship, in order to leverage the value creation for both companies. That means that they need to develop a long-term relationship in which we will share value and we will share value opportunity, growth opportunities. That is what we call a strategic customer. My customer is strategic to my growth and to my future positioning. Right. It is very different from a key customer. A key customer is, I would say, necessary to flourish. So they're not getting something unique like some strategic resources, a technology, and access to a market, etc., etc. But for instance, they represent a lot of volumes. So they have a direct impact on the company's sales. They have a direct impact on the company margin, profitability. They have a direct impact on the company's investment. A key customer can be a customer who finances a lot of investment in the toolings, on the equipment. So the customer finances the assets by investing at the supplier. So for the supplier, the customer becomes key because they are the only one who are able to finance that. So a key customer is necessary to feed the business model. What is the strategic intent of that kind of customers? First of all, grow the customer. They usually are customers which represent a big part of the sales portfolio. So we need to grow them, we need to make them as solid as possible, and we need to make sure that they will not go away. So we'll try also to maximize a profit with them. The profit is including, of course, the profitability on each and every product and every product line. But not only the profit is also how much they contribute to the investment of the technology. And we have to be careful also about these key customers when we're selling to them, because we can easily become dependent from them, and especially dependent on a knowledge or a know-how or an IP or in a technology, which means that one of the strategic intents of these key customers is try to internalize the knowledge, not to fall into the dependency toward the key customers. Right. And you have a third type of important customers, which we call the critical ones. And that's once you have fallen into the dependency. And you understand that this last strategic intent about the key customer is to avoid falling in that black scenario. So a critical customer is a customer that it would be a disaster to lose, because it would make us lose access to our markets, to our clients, to the final customers. It would be a disaster to lose them, and the strategic intent here is to pamper the relationship and the key people to keep the customer. The strategic intent is to stabilize the customer. By doing that, we are pampering for the sake of this stability. We pamper people, especially the key people, the key decision makers at the customer, and we try to magnify the relationship by putting in place a structure, steering committees, an exchange of knowledge. We make innovation days. We try to stimulate them. We make the customer dream so that they don't go away. So in reality, this is three types of value adds that a customer can have toward the supplier. And you can start to think, for when we will be speaking in half an hour, you can start to think about who you are and what you represent for your main customer. Are there some, for your main suppliers, sorry. Are there some suppliers for whom I am strategic? They need me because they need my techno, they need my market, they need me as an access to their own final customers. Do they need me because I'm so big in their portfolio, they can't lose me, and I'm investing a lot and I'm owning part of their assets? Or do they need me because without me they would disappear on the market? And that's being a critical customer. to the supplier. So you understand that when we say, well, what is attractiveness made of? It's made of three different things. And according to the situation you're in, you're not going to have the same relationship. With a strategic customer, you will have a relationship focused on exchange of idea, exchange of innovation, mutual technology attractiveness, thinking out of the box, investments, etc., etc. With a supplier who sees us as a key customer, the relationship will be more about assets, investments, common resources, joint team, maybe joint venture, etc., etc. With a supplier who sees us as a critical customer, our intent will be to get benefit of these relationships, so that the proactiveness of the supplier not to lose us brings us value, so that they don't waste our time. Right. So different types of relations, different types of attractiveness that we can have, different types of management of these suppliers, and we could even classify these relations. Usually in sales, people tend to classify customers, big customers, in three classes. You've got the usual ones. This is the base, right? You've got the silver ones, which are pretty more important. So they are not to be lost, but they are less important than the gold customers. The gold customers are the ones that are really necessary to the survival and the future of the business. And most of the customers are usual. This is what we call routine customers. A few customers are silver, and very, very few customers are gold customers. And this is why it's a kind of pyramid. It's upper, but much less suppliers than the silver and then the usual. From one company to another, the names change. It can be gold, silver, usual. It can be premium, business, normal, whatever the names. But usually there's a classification of importance of customers, which is usually at the three levels. We can make it very simple. We discussed strategic, critical, and key customers. Strategic and critical customers are usually treated as gold customers, right? Whereas key customers are usually treated as silver customers, which means that the most we can get from a supplier is when they see us as a strategic customer or as a critical customer. And of course, this will impact a lot what we will expect from these customers, and especially in terms of proactiveness, in terms of number of meetings, of transfer of technology, of transfer of knowledge, of sessions of innovation, etc., etc. From the suppliers who consider us as strategic and critical, we can expect a gold relationship. From suppliers who consider us as key customers, we can expect a little less a silver relationship. I would say that there are specifically some reasons, some precise reasons to be attractive, and I would like to focus on three of them: growth, technology, and know-how. Growth is usually the number one reason to be attractive. And research has shown that between a big customer who is bigger but doesn't grow that much and a smallest customer who is smaller but grows more, usually the second one, the smaller that grows more, what you can see here as customer B on this graph, is usually getting more investments, more information, more commercial presence. So what research shows is that it's better to be small and growing faster than to be big and growing slower. So in this case, it's, what it says is that customer B's customers B of the B type tend to be always preferred than customer A. Which gives a quick conclusion on our attractiveness. How much are we growing? How much are we sharing our growth prospects? How much are we promising, engaging on the growth? Sometimes we know we're growing, we just don't want to engage. So the suppliers don't want to take the risk because this is not attractive enough for them. They need not only a customer that has a good hope to grow, but also who engages on the growth by engaging on the volumes, on the growth of volumes. Roots for our attractiveness is, of course, the way that we manage our growth, that we let people, suppliers, know about the growth, that we engage on our growth. You may think that it's difficult because we can't engage on the future. We may grow, probably a probability that we grow, but we don't want to engage because it's not sure. Yes, but there's always a way to promise a growth to a supplier, and especially through bundling and globalization and iteration. So first of all, we can bundle volumes. So we could, some of you are coming from very big multinational companies. We can promise to bundle volumes progressively in the next 3 years, from one country to another, from one continent to another, from one plant to another, etc., etc. And there is the growth that they like and that they need. You can promise to standardize what you buy, right? Which is in reality a growth for them because they will do more of the same instead of doing a lot of small things. Another possibility to promise growth and to engage on growth is to show a growth prospect on the long run for 3 or 5 years that you don't engage on, and you engage only on the growth of next year, right? On the volumes of next year. And each year you adapt the numbers. Another very important reason to be attractive is the technology. And we I already said it in the explanations. What can be very attractive is an IP, a technology, a new way of doing business, etc., etc. That's revenue. What can the promise of revenue, of expectation of revenue? It can be also the fact that we share revenue, like when our growth is linked to one of their technologies. So we propose to share the revenue of a technology we bought from them. So they get a kind of incentive on the growth. It can be the reuse of a technology, and especially for companies who have invested in a technology, they haven't completely amortized yet. They have lost their clients with whom they were amortizing this technology, and then we are coming in and we are the opportunity to amortize the rest of the technology that is still not amortized. That can be a good way to make oneself more attractive. It can be the brand and the brand reputation. It can be the value of the asset, and it can be your own attractiveness. Another reason, a technological reason to be attractive is our willingness and ability to participate in modern networks of procurement, like ecosystems, like open innovation. So all these informal relations between a lot of entities, a lot of suppliers and customers working together to develop a concept, to develop a technology, to develop a common IP, sorry. Of course, this can be a reason for a supplier to be attracted by a customer. I know loads of companies who would like to participate in ecosystems, who would like to work in an open innovation mode. They just don't know how to do it, and they don't have the customers to do it with. So if we are one of these customers and we are bringing this opportunity, of course, this can be a technological reason to be attractive. Last one is the know-how. In reality, it works a little bit like knowledge. It's a little bit like the same philosophy, but instead of being tangible at the end, a technology, an IP, an intellectual property, it's more intangible. It's the experience curve. It's the ramp-up experience and the saving of ramp-up costs. So when we help them ramp up a product, and because there are ramping up a product is very costly, and we pay for part of these costs. That's a reason to be attractive. When instead of waiting 3-5 years to gain an experience in a technology, we make them take advantage of our own experience. We share our own experience, how to solve problems, how to manage quality, how to avoid non-quality crises, how to ensure security, to assure the supplies. When we communicate to them how to do in a business that they don't know, and to save ramp-up costs and to get experience quickly. At the end, this can also be a way to amortize more quickly an investment. We can share risks, and especially when suppliers want to invest in a technology or in a market which is unknown to them, right? So we can, exactly like we can share revenue, we can share risks, and we can share resources. And these are the two last points that you can see here. We can optimize resources so that they don't allow and spend too much money by putting too many people on a development technology, because we share the people, we share the human investment. And sometimes we can even share the resources. So we can have joint ventures, we can have common IPs, common properties, and sometimes even joint teams in which people are owned in common between the two companies. Here we are for the roots of attractiveness and what attractiveness is made of. Again, a 30-second break to understand if you have something to ask or something to say on that. You can write in the chat if there's any question. All right, then let's go for the next step, which is going to be a little quicker than the two others, which is enablers and blockers. So there are things which can help us to be attractive. These are the enablers, and things on the contrary which can block us to be attractive. So let's start by a little philosophy of it. You may have heard for human needs this classification called the Maslow pyramid of needs. We humans, basic physiological needs, which are usually just to sleep and eat. We've got safety needs. We need a home. We need love. We need social relationship and effective relationship. We need belonging. We need an identity. We need groups to belong to, and we need self-esteem. Right, and this is a kind of pyramid which say that it's not worth satisfying a need at level 2, 3, 4, or 5 if you don't satisfy the needs at level 1. These ones are more important. Right, this is what we call the pyramid of Maslow. You probably have heard of it for some of you already. Good, but it works the same in business-to-business relationship. What is a basic so-called physiological need? A basic physiological need is just to be paid, just to be sure of the business and to have the customer. So it's usually payment and that they can use us as a reference. Right, safety needs is the value of the business and the respect of payment agreement, so that we don't put them in situations of risks. Example, yeah, we pay, but we always pay late. So we put their cash always in a difficult situation. Other example, the value of the business is not respected. So basically, we have a contract, we engage on volume, and we're going to fulfill only part of these volumes. And actually, for them, it's a loss of value. So it puts them at risk. So having the relationship and being paid, having money flowing in is the basic needs. Then the next needs that they will have is the safety of working with it, being paid on time, and that we comply with our contracts. Then we have all this part of love and belonging, and this is the quality of information that we share, if our feedbacks are fair, if we collaborate to solve problems, and if we don't ask them to solve all problems, if we are open to accept improvement suggestions, if we're willing to provide support to their local bar, to their local and global people, all these are more advanced needs, right? And the advanced value that we can bring to them is how we recognize their contribution to our company success and the quality of the relationship with people, and especially top management people. Right, we are speaking about enablers and blockers. You can see that if you look at this classification, you've got a lot of enablers and blockers, and more than anything, the more down you are on this scale, the more you have a lot of blockers. Not paying on time, not respecting the volumes the engagement of volume can be a blocker. And on the contrary, when we do all this, so when there is no blocker, all what's on the top is more an enabler. And that raises a few very pragmatic questions, like this one. How do they see us? Do they see us as a nice partner to run with, or do they see us as the big buyer hammering on them and having them suffer? I have taken this sentence from the sales director of a company that you probably all know, called Microsoft, saying there are customers we have to work with, and customers, a few customers, we like to work with. You see the difference between the one that they have to work with, they're in the portfolio, but they don't give a damn, and they will not make a lot of efforts, and the one that they like to work with because it's an easy relationship, because they're providing a lot of value. And that is the perception that they have on us, and that is sometimes difficult and tricky to get this perception, because if you ask a key account manager, the supplier, what they think about you, the key account manager will probably never say that. If it's something negative, will not say the negative. They will say only the positive. They're paid for that, they're educated for that, this is their role. But it may not reflect what people really think about working with us. So we need to unveil the real feeling. We need to discover the content of their perception of the customer. And sometimes we'll see this a little later. We do this through surveys, through questions, because we need to understand what they really want. So what are the potential blockers? The biggest blockers are what we call the killers, what can kill the attractiveness, demanding more than what was agreed. Like we agreed on a contract, in a negotiation and a contract, that they should meet us every month, and we demand that they're here and they solve problems every week. Acknowledging only the bad performance and never the good ones. So when there is a non-quality crisis, we beat on them. But when they respect everything and they're solving problems, we just think it's normal. That's something that really kills the fundamentals here of the pyramid and make us perceived as the big hammer. Another thing is when, especially in technologies, we're imposing our ways when the supplier is an expert. So the supplier know, the supplier has benefit from a technology or a knowledge, but we're imposing our way. We want them to work with our technologies according to our processes. So we neglect what they can be bringing to us. Um, Signing long-term agreement on a win-lose basis, an unbalanced value between the two customers, using sharp practices, and not respecting the main value of the business to business. So this obviously can push the suppliers to perceive us as a big hammer and kill the attractiveness. So we have to really ask ourselves the questions of how do key suppliers, the strategic suppliers, critical suppliers see us? What make them love us or what make them hate working with us? What are the criteria that influence the perceptions? Is it how we deal with problems, how we manage quality, how we manage non-quality, how we share technologies, how much time we spend with them, etc., etc. And there are some companies who have developed indexes, like they measure in a constant time if the relationship is more adversarial or partnering, if the communication is open or not, if the help is big or not, if there are many obstacles or few obstacles, and they measure it on a constant base. That means it's a list of questions, so each of these dimensions is 5 or 10 questions that they ask regularly to everybody at the supplier, so that they ask at the supplier people every month or every 2 months. It usually works when the answers are anonymous, because when the answers are not anonymous, people dare not to say negative things, because remember, you're the customer. But in an anonymous way, you get more access to their true opinions on us. And we have to enlarge this analysis, and that's a key point, not only to current suppliers, but also to potential customers. That means that we have to compare ourselves with not only who are their customers, there are the customers today, but also to who will be their potential next customers. So at the end, we use a tool to measure attractiveness, which looks like that. You can see here how important, how strategic we are. This is our attractiveness through the positives, the technology, the strategic fit. And another dimension, which is our attractiveness because of the blockers. That means the difficulty to manage the customer. So in other terms, right, on the horizontal side, it's more the blockers. On the vertical side, it's more the enablers. And of course, if we want to be the preferred customer, we need to be here. We need to be very easy and very strategic. And we compare that with their other customers. So we position in this matrix towards their other customers. And as we said just previously, their current ones and their potential ones. So you try to build this matrix, and you ask them to give as much information as they can to help you build this matrix, to compare your attractiveness with their others. So this is you, this is your main competitor, this is another customer, this is another potential customer, etc., etc. It's always a little tricky to choose between being on this box, so strategic but difficult to manage, and on that box, easy to manage but not very strategic for the future. And the answer is that it's better to be strategic than easy to manage. Easy to manage ensures you to be attractive on the short term. Strategic ensures your attractiveness in the long term. Now, how do you measure these criteria? I gave you a few examples. The strategic importance is made of the volume, the growth, the profit. We could add the investment, etc., etc. And the difficulty to be managed is made of the interface required, the number of steering committees, how we help them solve problems, etc., etc. And that is the cost of managing us. Right. And I would like to go directly to a quick conclusion, which is the actions to enhance attractiveness. So first thing, we already said it, but let's formalize it. Ask them their feedback. Ask them what they need. Ask them their perception about you, about the quality of the information, the quality of the relationship, if you pay on time, if we're open enough. Your own perception of yourself may be different of how they perceive yourself. So ask them their perception, and it usually requires a little time to answer to discover their real perception. Right. So enhancing attractiveness is usually made of monitoring the growth in their portfolio, planning our investment in their assets, planning the co-investment, following up the indirect revenue, following up the development and the recruitment of people to work with. So if you ask them, you probably have to ask questions like that. In the last 5 years, have you co-invested with us? Have you co-invested with others? Have you co-invested in R&D? Have you won other clients thanks to our technologies? Are we part of your 3 main global references, etc., etc.? These are the questions you can ask. To enhance the innovation potential, you can measure the pace of innovation, see if the first initiative comes more from us or from them, measure the ratio of adoption or rejection of innovation. That means how many ideas submitted actually came to a final production. Survey their innovation practices, map where the necessary competencies. So you can ask questions like, how many innovations have you submitted? Have we approached you with innovation? Have you approached us with innovation? Did we refuse innovations that other of your customers had accepted? Are the innovations which you proposed coming from you, us, a collaboration between you and us, external markets? Do you practice open innovation with others or only with us, etc., etc.? These are examples of questions you can ask to survey that. Last one is to make it easier to prefer us by being easier to be managed. So it's about our KPIs. Do we measure enough? Do we measure too much, too little? What do others do? Ensure that both parties measure performance together. It's not in their hands or in our hands. That we detect the communicational improvements on targets, on lead time, on correction actions, that we check the real operational interfaces, who works with whom, who takes decision with whom, the strategic interfaces, who is the main decision maker and who are the main decision maker, both sides, does it fit, and how our practices are fed. So the questions to be asked is, for instance, how many KPIs do we use per contract? Do we use more KPIs than your other customers? Less KPIs than your other customers? What are the KPIs that you think are prioritarian? Which are the KPIs which you think are missing? Do you measure together with us or validate our measurements, or do we just measure and impose a measurement on you? Is a performance measurement overall more used to stimulate, solve problems, or more of a sanction to ask for money compensation? And other types of communication of question that you can ask is to ask them a general feeling about the collaboration with us, the people collaborating with us, about the forecast, if we have complied with the forecast and the engagement of volumes, if we have how they perceive our processes in procurement, if they think it's helping, or on the contrary, to have a what are the key factors of having a good relation with us, etc., etc. And at the very, very end, we want to build a relational matrix and to rebuild a relational matrix. All right, we are done now with this webinar. We now have 30 minutes for question and answers. I have already a question from Andre saying that a big change in the procurement function responsibility, we are not necessarily prepared for that change, and also the management of our companies is not prepared for that change. We need a different mindset and probably an additional head account and how to prove the return on investment. So thank you for your question, Andre. I would like to give you the speech, if possible, so that you can speak directly, but I do not manage to let you speak directly. Okay. Okay, I think Andre, you can speak. No, seeing that you can't speak. Hello. Yeah, would you like to say more about this question?
Okay. Sorry?
You're expressing a doubt on the feasibility of all this, right? And especially you say you are not prepared for such a change. The supplier sees the supplier as a partner and not as a cost generator. Can you say more so that we start to discuss about it?
Yes, of course. I'm from Poland. I'm the board member of the Polish Association of Procurement Managers, and my comments are based on experience and discussions with my colleagues here working in procurement. And of course, I fully agree with you. A very interesting presentation. Thank you. That this is a very, very important element which still we are missing. Therefore, what I'm saying is we still don't look at how not only to negotiate lower costs and etc., but how to secure our supply base. And as you clearly explained, the world is changing dramatically, and in many areas it's the supplier market and not the buyer market. But with this change, we are still using the old tools. Okay, I have not faced any company who are doing it in a very professional manner as you presented us. It means having the tools, process to measure our attractiveness from the perspective of our suppliers. And this is what I'm saying. What I said that it's a sort of a barrier. Plus, within ourselves as a function, plus also a mindset within our management, where procurement is still perceived in many companies as cost cutter, and not the added value, let's say, delivery. That's what I meant by this.
Yes, thank you very much for giving more on your question. You remember I started with that in the introduction. We buyers, we procurement, we have developed, we have been raised in a context which is not today's context. We've been raised in a context of competition among suppliers. They were all competing to sell to us, and a context in which the main value added, the main technologies, the main value generation was on the downstream, on the distribution side and on the production side, which means that we buyers, we were from the company who were most generating value. This world has changed for two reasons. First of all, the suppliers have become more and more powerful, bigger and bigger. This is what you call being a supplier market. And second, by becoming bigger, they also are more innovative, they have more value, right? You can see it if you think about, I mentioned the case of self-driving car. Who is making the market? Not the distributors, not the car makers. It's other companies, and the companies who invent the new technologies, and they're not necessarily the car makers. So indeed, there must be a change of procurement practices, and we have to be more commercial oriented and think more about strategies and less about our procurement process. So it has direct impacts, which means that be careful that our procurement process with all our steps and our tools and our RFQs and our RFIs, it's very good. We have to use it, but we have also to have the freedom of sometimes not using it, because it would kill all our attractiveness. If you think about what we have discussed as killers or blockers of attractiveness, a lot of them in reality come from our purchasing tools, our purchasing processes, our purchasing administration. So we need to explain that we have spent 40 years to develop such an automatization and a process in procurement to come to a point that we want to be free to use it when necessary or not to use it when not necessary. And this is why I think that in reality we need a lot of leadership in procurement, because it's not to be explained to buyers or to the CPO, it's to be explained to finance, it's to be explained to the CEO, to be explained to the stakeholders, and we need a lot of this leadership to have them understand that the change of balance of power between suppliers and buyers induces a different role and status of procurement within the company. So I know, Andre, that it's something very difficult to implement. It will not happen in 1 year. This is a cultural change. A culture changes in 5 years, in 10 years. But and it's also a change that will not happen alone. That means it will not happen by itself. That means we really need to push it so that it happens.
Absolutely.
So, but there's a good news. There are good news in that direction. I don't know how old you are, Andre. I'm 45. I remember buyers when I was starting my career, buyers being recruited either with no education or people who have been in production for years, and for the last years of their career they were in procurement, etc., etc. Procurement today is recruiting young, fresh people, freshly educated, high-range people with the best studies, the best universities. So probably the change will come also from the composition of the procurement staff, of the procurement people.
Of course. I mean, the young blacks, they don't have this, I would say, old habits, okay, developed when procurement was only cost cutting, okay, so buy as cheap as possible, but still, for me, it's really a dramatic change to not to sit with your supplier face to face across the table, like two fighters, but to bring them on our side, and on the opposite of the table we should put the problem. Okay. I mean the business objective we have.
Yes, absolutely.
This is today the way the proper companies, good companies, are expecting from procurement to help with their knowledge and relations with the outside world, to help support their business objectives and targets, or to bring innovations, etc., what you said.
Yes, absolutely. I would add another point, which is coming from what I've seen in a lot of companies. When buyers tend to take initiatives of communication, and again, this is a change in culture. Salespeople, marketing people, they know very well how to communicate internally, to market internally their own ideas, their own initiatives. This is not something that we've been used to, right? We've been used to do our job. That means we take a specification, we challenge the specification, we negotiate with the market, we get transferred into a contract, and we follow up the execution of the contract. We haven't spent a lot of our time to create events and make us present and communicate about ourselves. But when buyers do that, it's actually working very well. So I've seen, for instance, in certain companies, buyers who have made a kind of internal fair of suppliers. So there was a mini trade show of a lot of suppliers at the canteen to show all the innovative suppliers, to show all the alternative solution that they can bring, etc., so that everybody was aware. So basically, for 1 week at the canteen of the headquarters, the suppliers were demonstrating things to show not their value, but to show the value of procurement. Sometimes it's having internal innovation day, in which you have stakeholders meet procurement, and procurement showing all the innovation potential of the suppliers. And of course, there's a trade-off there. And the trade-off is we can bring this, look at the value we can bring, but you have to let us take initiative and not put us in a downstream mode, like in a reactive mode to stakeholders. We have to be able to take initiative and influence the stakeholders, and sometimes even create the need before the stakeholders express it.
Fully agree.
Sorry?
I fully agree with what we are saying, okay? And I'm very glad that you are talking about this, that you are organizing webinars on this subject, because this will, I hope, open our minds and be a start to look for the role of our function from different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think this is the answer, because a lot of us, we ask ourselves, okay, what is the future of procurement? With all these new technologies, you know, should the business, are we still going to survive, and what would be our role? And I think that what you today presented is one of the answers, okay?
Yeah.
It's not that all the process with RFIs, RFPs, RFQs will be automatized, okay? There will be robotics doing a lot for us, comparing, analyzing, doing simulations. But we should move to this area of building the relations with the suppliers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which any technology or artificial intelligence will not do.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is even more valid in the businesses in which we have a lot of technology, a lot of disruptive technologies.
Okay.
All right. Is there any other question? So you can ask the question orally or write it on the chat, and then I make it public, and I give you the opportunity to speak with everybody. Is there any other question from anybody? let's wait 1 more minute, and if we don't have any other question, we are going to close this webinar. You can ask questions on the chat or directly by your microphone. No more? All right. Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention. We do hope to see you again at the EIPM, either for another webinar or in one of our certification courses. We also have a conference end of December that you are invited to. The next webinar is about the culture of innovation in purchasing. Or during one of our certification programs, we have 2 intakes per year, or even, who knows, if you are interested in our executive MBA, we'd be happy to receive to see you as a candidate. Thank you very much, all of them, and have a very good day.